thank you for taking the time today to talk about the film. I think it's a really beautiful film, and I feel like it's something that a lot of people are going to see themselves in, both in a positive way and a negative way. I guess we'll sort of start with the bad stuff first, because this is a film that does deal with trauma, not just amongst Indigenous people, but I think it's also a kind of trauma that a lot of people experience. And I was just wondering, for you as a filmmaker, what the process is like in terms of trying to make sure that you're speaking truth to those people that are going through similar situations.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very delicate and complicated process. It takes a lot of care, and I think a lot of kindness to be able to engage with that type of material. I'm not a stranger to trauma in my own life, so I sort of think of, I sort of try to center that a little bit when I think of how I'm dealing with these things. It can obviously go too far sometimes, and I've been on the receiving end in audiences of films like that where it's sort of like, this just made me feel awful, and I now have to walk away and live with this, in my body. So I think it's something, it takes a lot of care to touch upon it, but not dwell or dig or mine into it, but so much as acknowledge that it exists and it's a reality, and then hopefully move into a place where it's more focused on healing, which is also painful and difficult and takes a lot of care to deal with. But yeah, it's something that I'm very careful about, and it takes me a long time. Like this film is over 11 years of work, so a lot of that is conversations with people, or showing them drafts, or talking to friends or family or community members about it, respectfully, and seeing like what are the reactions, like, oh, that's a bit too much. Or like, oh, you're kind of like dancing around the subject now. So it's like you don't want to do either, or I don't want to do either, I should say. I believe in facing those things sort of head on and dealing with them when the time is, right, which is a different time for everyone.
Yeah.
We're closed. Sir, are you okay?
I saw him.
Both swore that we'd never talk about this.
If he can get to me in the city, he's already at your back door. You take care of him, and we can both get back to our own lives.
And it's interesting that you say that you know what kinds of films like this don't work and that do make people come away from it just feeling awful. And I think one of the things in this film that's really key to not making people feel awful is that it has a very strong brotherly bond to it, which is good for something when you're dealing with subject matter like this, because you make people feel like they're not alone. So in the process of writing and then in the process of casting, what was it like trying to create that brotherly dynamic that's going to ground the film?
So that was the main thing when we were sort of going into casting and like chemistry tests. Was like, how do these actors, there's a couple of pairs of them, how do they interact together? Because that chemistry, that relationship is sort of the linchpin in a way that carries us through everything. So there was a lot of like, let's run scenes together. Like sometimes movies, you cast and you're like, you're the lead, and then you put them in the room and they don't get along at all. For whatever reason, it might just be like, they just don't vibe, they don't click. So I had spent a lot of time talking to Forrest and to Blake about like, how do they relate to the material? What is like, those experiences with siblings or family or cousins or, so on and so on and so on. And then putting them together and seeing how they interact and sort of like poking them to see, what happens. And certainly over the course of the movie, I think that dynamic solidified and comes through in the performance. But it was definitely a big focus, a major focus.
And in terms of the writing of it, in terms of how they have these sort of, there's this age gap between them that's very much a very lived-in younger brother, older brother sort of dynamic. Which kind of came first in the writing process? Was it coming up with the tale of the younger siblings or what the older siblings are going through?
Technically, the younger ones. The very first scene that I ever wrote was this kind of like the central core traumatic scene of the entire movie. And then sort of like building out from there. But even in that like little short film, sort of it was at the time that I wrote, which was the seed of everything, had the older versions of themselves sort of witnessing this event. So in a way, it starts with the younger ones because I'd say they're like the main characters of those scenes. But you know, the olders were in the background. But then after that, it was sort of like hopscotch in a way. You know, there'd be like scenes with the younger ones, like what if we did this scene? What if we did that scene? And how would the older ones interact or engage? You know, and that's something that I thought about a lot. Like if you can speak to like a younger version of yourself, not like something that's like, don't take that person to prom, but that it's more sort of like pivotal of like, appreciate this person while you still have time, or things like that. Like what would those situations be? What would you say to your younger self? And then sort of like putting it into the context of this specific story.
We're looking for a cave deep in the old forest with petroglyphs carved into the entrance.
This
place is tricky. Seen all sorts of things. Sometimes it takes one spirit to fight another.
And the last thing that I really wanted to get into you with is this film is very respectful of its characters. It's also very respectful of the land that it was filmed upon, because it's a gorgeous looking film. And knowing how film sets run, I'm kind of amazed that you were able to get so many great shots and just turn in something that looks this good, because I know you would have to go to sometimes pretty remote areas where it might be hard to get in and out without leaving a footprint. So yes. I was wondering what it's like for you as a filmmaker to go into spaces like this and treat that with just as much respect as you do the story.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that you have to sort of talk to the crew about, and it's every level, right? You talk about how you're going into a space and respect it. You know also that even when everyone's on board with that, no one's tromping or destroying or leaving garbage behind or things like that, that there's an innate destruction, there's an impact that 100 people have walking through a forest. So also being mindful of like, can the forest sustain this? And in some places, the answer is no, and then you don't shoot there. Sometimes it's like, yes, this is a beautiful place and it can support us and it can recover from our presence later, but it's way too far to lug all the gear and the lights and all that logistical stuff. And then it's sort of like, well, then that's also a no, and it becomes a balance. But there's also, I return to the places. I try to return after a year and a half to 18 months just to make sure, okay, this place, the moss is springing back, the trees are healthy, did anyone leave anything? But
you can send it back to them if they did. You'll know exactly who left it.
I knew it was you. But yeah, there's a lot of on every level, every department, a lot of care that goes into that.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Again, very lovely film.
Awesome.
And I'm really in awe of what you were able to accomplish with it. The story's great. Yeah, love it. Love it, man. Thank you so much.
I just threw it together. It's not.
Just slapped it together on the fly.
Yeah.
5 guys, a truck. Just threw it out to the middle of the woods.
Yeah, we just decided to do it one weekend and